How are y'all holding up today? My dear friends, it's Eva, your 65-year-old neighbor from Eufaula, Alabama, sitting here with my sweet tea, thinking about you. I know life can weigh heavy sometimes, those quiet moments when you wonder if the love you've given your family still matters. Oh, we've all been there, haven't we tonight? I'm sharing a story that's close to my heart, about Ruth Goldstein, a woman like us, who poured her soul into her family only to feel forgotten. But let me tell you, she found a way to stand tall and shine. So, grab your coffee, Masang, maybe a cozy blanket, and let's walk this journey together. If Ruth's courage speaks to you, hit that subscribe button and join our little circle of story lovers, ready for a tale that'll warm your heart. The dining room glowed with the soft flicker of Passover candles, their light dancing across the matzah and the Seder plate like little stars in a quiet sky. The air carried the familiar scent of gefilte fish, the dish I'd spent all morning preparing, and the faint sweetness of Manischewitz wine. Outside, through the wide window, that monstrous trampoline loomed in the yard, a 55-inch eyesore that had sparked this whole mess. I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded tightly around the embroidered napkin my mother had made decades ago, and I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Daniel, my son, stared at his plate. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, gripped her wine glass, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan, my 2-year-old grandson, giggled as he crumbled a piece of matzah, oblivious to the storm brewing. I stood, my knees trembling not from age, but from the fire building inside me. 68 years I'd carried this family through loss, through sacrifice, through dreams I'd buried to give Daniel a future. And now, here, in this Long Island home I'd helped them buy. I was about to do something I never thought I'd have the heart for. Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. You think you know everything. You think you built this life all on your own. But do you know who's been holding up Levine Designs all this time? Her eyes narrowed, a flash of defiance. What are you talking about? Ruth. I took a breath, the kind you take before you step off a cliff. Gold Horizon Ventures. I'm the one behind it. I've poured millions into your company. Sarah. Millions to keep your dreams alive, to keep this house standing, and this morning, I pulled every cent. The room went still, as if the candles themselves held their breath. Sarah's wine glass slipped from her hand, splashing red across the white tablecloth. Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. The neighbors and cousins around the table whispered, their murmurs like a distant tide. Ethan, bless his heart, clapped his hands, thinking it was a game. You can't do that, Sarah stammered, her voice cracking. My company, it'll collapse. Ruth, please, you don't understand if you don't want me in this family, I said, my words slow and deliberate. Then I don't need to keep your company standing. I'm done being invisible. I set a letter on the table, addressed to Daniel, my handwriting neat despite the tremor in my fingers. It held everything: my hurt, my love, my truth. Then I turned and walked out, the spring air cool against my face, the weight of their stunned silence trailing behind me. For the first time in years, I felt like Ruth Goldstein again, not just a grandmother pushed to the sidelines. I didn't cry when I got back to my apartment in Brooklyn. The drive from Long Island had been long, the highway stretching out like a memory I couldn't shake. My place was small, cozy in the way old things are, wood floors that creaked, a bookshelf stuffed with novels and photo albums, a kitchen that still smelled faintly of the cinnamon rugelach I'd baked for Ethan last week. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across my lap, and picked up a framed picture of Daniel and me. Taken when he was 5, his gap-toothed grin, my arms around him, the park swing frozen in time. Back then, I'd dreamed of a family where love was enough, where Passover meant laughter and stories. Not this breaking. How did it come to this? How did I? Ruth Goldstein, a woman who'd raised a son alone, built a quiet fortune, and poured my heart into my grandson, end up standing in my son's dining room, tearing down everything I'd helped build. It started with that trampoline, I suppose, but it was so much more than that. It was years of small cuts, of being dismissed, of feeling like a guest in my own family. And it all came to a head during this Passover, a holiday meant to celebrate freedom, when I felt more trapped than ever. A few weeks earlier, I'd been sitting in this same apartment, scrolling through catalogs on my old laptop, looking for something to make Ethan smile. He was turning 2 soon, and I could still hear his giggle from the last time I'd pushed him on a park swing. Daniel had called me that morning, his voice warm but distracted, telling me about their plans for Passover. "Ma, we're hosting the Seder this year," he said. "Sarah's got it all planned out. You're coming." "Right. Of course," I'd said, my heart lifting. "I'll bring the gefilte fish. And, Daniel, I was thinking, maybe a trampoline for Ethan, something fun for the backyard." There was a pause, then a chuckle. "A trampoline. Ma, he's not even 2. Let me talk to Sarah." I should have known then. Sarah had always been particular about Ethan, his food, his schedule, his toys. She was a modern mom, all about gentle parenting and organic snacks, which I respected, even if I didn't always understand. But when Daniel called back, his tone was apologetic. "Sarah says no to the trampoline. Ma, she thinks it's too dangerous. Maybe a swing set instead," I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "All right, a swing set then." But something in me stirred, a stubborn spark. I'd seen the way Ethan's eyes lit up at the park, the way he bounced with joy. A trampoline wasn't just a toy, it was a memory I wanted to give him, like the ones I'd given Daniel. So I ordered it anyway, a 55-inch trampoline, small enough for their yard, or so I thought. I told myself I'd talk Sarah into it, show her it was safe. I didn't expect it to become a wall. The trampoline arrived the morning of the Seder, a massive box delivered to Daniel and Sarah's Long Island home. I wasn't there when it showed up. I was in my kitchen, shaping gefilte fish with my hands, humming Dayenu to keep my nerves steady. But Daniel called me, his voice tight. "Ma, the trampoline's here. Sarah's up. She says we told you not to get it." My stomach sank. I thought we could talk about it. It's not that big. "Daniel, Ethan would love it." "Ma, you should have checked with us first. Sarah's really mad. Just come to the Seder." "Okay, we'll figure it out." I hung up, my hands still dusted with matzah meal, and felt a pang of guilt. But beneath it was something else, resentment. Maybe. For years, I'd bitten my tongue when Sarah corrected me in front of Ethan, when she brushed off my suggestions like they were relics from another time. "Ruth, kids don't eat candy anymore," she'd say. Or, "We don't do naps like that now." I'd smile, nod, keep the peace. But the trampoline. That was my line in the sand, a small act of defiance to prove I still mattered. When I arrived at their house that evening, the Seder table was set like a picture from a magazine white tablecloth, crystal glasses, a Seder plate Sarah had bought online. The house was small but modern, with hardwood floors and a view of the backyard where the trampoline box sat, unopened, like an unwelcome guest. Ethan ran to me, his curls bouncing, and I scooped him up, breathing in the baby shampoo scent of him. "Bubble," I whispered, kissing his cheek. For a moment, everything felt right. But then Sarah appeared, her smile tight. "Ruth, you brought the gefilte fish." "Great. Let's get started." No mention of the trampoline. But I could feel it hanging between us, heavy as the spring air outside. Daniel hugged me, but his eyes darted to Sarah, like he was waiting for her to set the tone. The Seder began, cousins and neighbors filling the room with chatter. I tried to focus on the Haggadah, on the story of freedom. But my eyes kept drifting to the window, to that box in the yard. I should have known it would come up. Halfway through the meal, Sarah set down her wineglass and turned to me, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Ruth, can we talk about the trampoline?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You knew he didn't want it. Ethan's too young, it's dangerous. Why would you go behind our backs?" The table went quiet. I felt every eye on me, like I was a child caught misbehaving. "Sarah," I said, my voice softer than I meant, "I just wanted Ethan to have fun. I thought we could discuss it. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "You don't discuss, Ruth, you just do what you want, and I'm done with it. If you can't respect our rules, I don't want you around Ethan. Don't come back here." The words hit like a slap. Daniel looked down, his fork frozen in his hand. Ethan, oblivious, banged his spoon on the table. The cousins whispered, their pity stinging more than Sarah's words. I clutched my mother's napkin, my throat tight, and forced a smile. "I see," I said, standing. "I'll go." I walked out, the night air cool against my burning cheeks, and drove home, the highway blurring through tears I refused to let fall. Passover was supposed to be about liberation, but I'd never felt more caged. Back in my apartment, I sat with that photo of Daniel, my heart aching with questions. How had it come to this? Why had I pushed so hard with that trampoline? And why? After all I'd given my money, my love, my silence, did I feel like a stranger in my son's life? I thought of the millions I'd funneled into Sarah's company, Levine Designs, through Gold Horizon Ventures, a secret I'd kept to avoid seeming like I was meddling. I thought of the loan I'd given Daniel for this house, calling it a gift so he wouldn't feel burdened, and I thought of Ethan, my light, my reason for waking up each morning. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the Gold Horizon account, and stared at the numbers. Millions of dollars, years of careful investments, all to build a future for my family. And for what? To be told I wasn't welcome, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, my voice steady despite the hour. "Pull it all," I said, "every cent from Levine Designs." "Ruth, are you sure?" he asked. "It'll tank the company, I'm sure." I said, "It's time they knew who I am." As I hung up, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in years, like the first bloom of lilacs in spring. I wasn't just a grandmother, a widow, a shadow in my son's life. I was Ruth Goldstein, and I was done being invisible. The Seder was behind me, but Passover was coming to an end, and I had one last gathering to face. I'd walk back into that house, not to beg, but to show them the truth. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to keep Ethan in my heart without losing myself. If you've ever felt pushed aside in your own family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel to follow Ruth's journey and see how one woman reclaims her place in a world that tried to forget her. The morning after that fateful Passover Seder, I woke to the familiar creak of my Brooklyn apartment's floorboards and the faint hum of traffic outside. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn oak table where I'd left a half-finished cup of chamomile tea. My kitchen smelled of cinnamon and memory, a lingering trace of the rugelach I'd baked for Ethan before everything fell apart. I stood at the sink, washing dishes with slow, deliberate movements, trying to make sense of the ache in my chest. Sarah's words still echoed in my mind. "Don't come back here." They were sharp, like the edge of a broken plate, and they cut deeper than I'd expected. I dried my hands on a faded dish towel, one my mother had embroidered with tiny blue flowers, and looked at the photo on the fridge. Ethan, his curls wild, grinning as he clutched a toy truck I'd given him. My bubble. The thought of not seeing him, of being banished from his laughter, felt like losing a piece of myself. But beneath the hurt was something else, something stubborn and alive. I wasn't ready to fade away, not after all I'd done, all I'd given, not after the secrets I'd kept to hold this family together. I sat at the table, my fingers tracing the grain of the wood, and let my mind wander back to the beginning, to the roots of this mess, to understand why I'd stood in Daniel's dining room last night, tearing down the world I'd helped build. I had to go back to the woman I was before I became just Grandma Ruth. It was 1985 and I was 40, a widow with a 10-year-old son and a heart still raw from losing my husband. Eli. We lived in a cramped Brooklyn walk-up, the kind with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked like a bad drum. I worked 2 jobs bookkeeping by day, waitressing at a diner by night to keep Daniel fed and clothed. But I had a dream, one Eli and I had shared to build something lasting, something our son could inherit. So I started small, buying a rundown brownstone with every penny I'd saved, fixing it up, and selling it for a profit. That was the first step, the seed of what became my quiet fortune. I remember the day I closed that deal, standing in the realtor's office with Daniel at my side. His sneakers scuffed from playing in the park. He was clutching a comic book, his eyes bright with questions. "Ma, are we rich now?" he asked, and I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not yet, sweetheart," I said. "But we're going to be okay, over the years." I bought and sold more properties, each one a brick in the foundation of our future. I never told Daniel how much I'd made, not wanting him to feel pressured or spoiled. When he went to college, I paid his tuition in full, calling it a scholarship so he wouldn't ask questions. When he married Sarah and they struggled to buy their Long Island home, I funneled money through a low-interest loan from a bank I quietly influenced. And when Sarah's interior design startup, Levine Designs, needed capital to survive, I became the silent partner behind Gold Horizon Ventures, pouring millions into her dream without ever taking credit. Why the secrecy? I didn't want to be the meddling mother-in-law, the one who dangled money like a leash. I wanted Sarah and Daniel to feel they'd earned their life, to stand tall in their own story. But somewhere along the way, my silence became a shadow, and I faded into the background of their world, a sweet old lady who brought gefilte fish and told stories. Not the woman who'd built their foundation. Sarah Levine was a force, I'll give her that. At 34, she ran Levine Designs with the kind of sharp-edged ambition that made people sit up and listen. Her office in downtown Manhattan was all glass and chrome, with mood boards pinned to the walls, and a coffee machine that hissed like it was plotting a takeover. I visited once, a year ago, bringing Ethan along so Sarah could see him during a busy day. She'd hugged him, her smile bright but brief, before turning back to her laptop. "Ruth, thanks for bringing him," she said, her eyes already on a spreadsheet. "We're pitching to a big client next week. If we land this, it's a game changer." "That's wonderful," I said, bouncing Ethan on my knee. "You've worked so hard." "Sarah," she nodded, but there was a flicker of something pride. Maybe, or defensiveness. "Yeah, it's all me. No one handed me anything." I smiled, swallowing the truth. No one handed her anything, sure, except the millions I'd funneled through Gold Horizon to keep her company afloat during its rocky first years. I'd sat in meetings with my lawyer, signing checks while Sarah was still sketching designs on napkins, believing her talent deserved a chance. But I never told her. And that was my mistake. To Sarah, I was just Ruth, the mother-in-law who didn't understand modern parenting or why Ethan couldn't have a piece of candy before lunch. The trouble with the trampoline started a few weeks before Passover, in early April. I'd driven out to Long Island to spend a Saturday with Ethan, my old Toyota humming along the expressway. Daniel and Sarah's house was modest but charming, with a white picket fence and a backyard just big enough for a swing set or, I thought, a small trampoline. Ethan greeted me at the door, his arms wide. And I scooped him up, breathing in his warmth. "Bubble, look at you," I said, kissing his cheek. "Want to play in the yard?" Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair pulled back, a Starbucks cup in hand. "Ruth, you're early," she said, her smile polite but strained. "Ethan's got a schedule today, music class at 10, then lunch and a nap." "Oh, I won't mess up his schedule," I said, setting Ethan down. "I brought some kugel, and I was thinking maybe a trampoline for his birthday, something fun for the backyard." Sarah's smile froze. "A trampoline? Ruth, he's not even 2. It's not safe. We've talked about this." I felt a pang, remembering Daniel's call after I'd mentioned the idea. "I know, but I found a small one, just 55 inches. It's made for toddlers." I thought no. She cut in, her voice firm. "We don't want a trampoline. If you want to get him something, maybe books or a puzzle, something educational." I nodded, my cheeks warm. "All right, Sarah, I'll look at puzzles." But as I played with Ethan that day, pushing him on the tiny swing they already had, I couldn't shake the image of him bouncing with joy, his laughter filling the air. I'd seen a trampoline like that at a neighbor's house, with a safety net and soft padding, and it felt like the perfect gift, a way to give Ethan the kind of carefree moment I'd given Daniel when he was small, so I ordered it, telling myself I'd convince Sarah when it arrived. I didn't expect it to become a symbol of everything wrong between us. The next week, I stopped by again, this time with a bag of jelly candies for Ethan. Sarah was in the living room, sorting through fabric samples for her next project. Ethan toddled over, his eyes lighting up at the candies, but before I could hand him one, Sarah swooped in. "Ruth, please," she said, taking the bag. "Ethan doesn't need sugar. We're trying to keep his diet clean." "They're just jelly candies," I said, my voice light but my heart sinking. "One won't hurt." Sarah sighed, setting the bag on a high shelf. "It's not about one candy, it's about consistency. You don't get how we're raising him." I looked at Daniel, who was fiddling with his phone on the couch, hoping he'd say something, but he just shrugged, his eyes avoiding mine. "Ma, Sarah's got a point. We're trying to do things a certain way." I forced a smile. "The kind you paste on when you're swallowing hurt." "All right, I'll respect that." But as I drove home, the sting of Sarah's words lingered. "You don't get how we're raising him. It wasn't just about candy or trampolines. It was about me. My place in their lives. I'd given them everything, from the money for their house to the capital for Sarah's company. But to them, I was just an old woman with outdated ideas. I thought of the Gold Horizon Ventures account, the millions I'd invested in Sarah's dream, and wondered if they'd ever see me as more than a grandmother who brought kugel and got in the way. Back in my apartment, I stood at the stove, stirring a pot of chicken soup I'd planned to bring to the Seder. The steam rose, warm and familiar, and I let myself drift to a memory of Passover 1978, when Daniel was 3. We'd lived in a tiny apartment then, barely enough room for a Seder table. But Eli and I had made it special. I'd sung Dayenu to Daniel, his small hands clapping, and Eli had laughed, saying, "Ruth, you're going to make this kid love Passover more than Hanukkah." That was the life I'd wanted for Daniel, a family filled with warmth, with stories, with love. Now, as I chopped carrots for the soup, I felt a flicker of hope. The Seder was coming, a chance to bring us together. I'd make my gefilte fish, tell Ethan the story of the Exodus, and maybe, just maybe, Sarah would see that I wasn't trying to take over. I looked at the calendar on the wall, the date of the Seder circled in red. and whispered a prayer that this Passover would be different, that we'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, I felt a shadow, a whisper of doubt. The trampoline was on its way, and I hadn't told Sarah. I thought I could smooth things over, but I didn't know it would be the spark that set everything ablaze. The Long Island air was crisp that April evening, carrying the faint scent of lilacs from a neighbor's yard as I pulled into Daniel and Sarah's driveway. My old Toyota rattled to a stop, and I sat for a moment, clutching the Tupperware of gefilte fish I'd spent all morning preparing. The house glowed warmly from within, its windows framing a picture of family, exactly what Passover was supposed to be. I'd circled this date on my calendar weeks ago, dreaming of a night filled with stories, songs, and Ethan's laughter. But as I stepped out, my eyes caught the massive box in the backyard. The trampoline I'd ordered, against Sarah's wishes. It stood there like an uninvited guest, and a knot tightened in my stomach. I should have cancelled the delivery. I should have listened. I smoothed my sweater, a soft blue one I'd worn for years, and carried the gefilte fish to the door. Ethan's giggle greeted me before I even knocked, and when Daniel opened the door, his hug was quick but warm. "Ma, you made it," he said, his eyes darting to the kitchen where Sarah was arranging a Seder plate. "Come in, it's going to be a great night." I forced a smile, hoping he was right, wouldn't miss it. "Sweetheart, where's my bubble?" Ethan toddled over, his curls bouncing, and I scooped him up, kissing his forehead. "Grandma's here," I whispered, breathing in the sweet scent of his baby shampoo. For a moment, the weight of the trampoline, of Sarah's disapproval, melted away. This was why I came for him. For the family I'd always dreamed of. Sarah appeared, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, a crisp white apron over her dress. "Ruth, you brought the gefilte fish perfect," she said, her smile polite but tight, like a rubber band stretched too far. "Let's get started. The cousins are here, and the neighbors just arrived." I nodded, setting Ethan down and following her to the dining room. The table was a vision white tablecloth, crystal glasses, a Seder plate with parsley, shank bone, and charosé, all arranged like something from a Martha Stewart magazine. Candles flickered, casting a golden glow, and a stack of Haggadahs waited at each place setting. It was beautiful, but it felt like Sarah's Seder, not ours. I placed my gefilte fish on the table, its humble plastic container looking out of place next to her artisanal matzah. The Seder began with the familiar rhythm of tradition. Daniel lit the candles, his voice steady as he recited the blessing. Sarah led the first reading, her tone confident, almost performative. I watched Ethan, perched in his high chair, clapping as the cousins sang Ma Nishtana, the 4 questions. I leaned over, whispering to him, "That's what you'll sing one day, Bublé." And he grinned, his tiny hand grabbing a piece of matzah. For a while, it felt right. The room buzzed with chatter, Cousin Rachel talking about her new job, neighbor Mr. Cohen joking about his golf swing. I sipped my Manischewitz, the sweet wine warming my throat, and let myself believe we could be a family tonight. I even started to tell Ethan the story of the Exodus, my voice soft but clear. A long time ago, our people were slaves in Egypt, but God led them to freedom. Sarah cut in, her smile sharp. "Ruth, let's keep it short for Ethan. He's too young for the whole story." She handed him a sippy cup, redirecting his attention. "We'll do a kid-friendly version later." I nodded, my cheeks warm, and sank back into my chair. It was a small thing, but it stung, like a paper cut you don't notice until it burns. I glanced at Daniel, hoping for a reassuring look, but he was focused on his Haggadah, avoiding the tension. I clutched my mother's embroidered napkin, the one she'd made for our Seders back in the 70s, and tried to focus on the ritual. The trouble came halfway through the meal. just after we'd dipped parsley in salt water. Sarah set down her fork, her eyes fixed on the window, where the trampoline box loomed in the darkening yard. She turned to me, her voice loud enough to silence the table. "Ruth, can we talk about that trampoline?" she said, her words slicing through the chatter. "You knew he didn't want it. Ethan's not even 2. It's dangerous. Why would you go behind our backs?" The room went still, the candles seeming to flicker in protest. Every eye turned to me. Rachel, Mr. Cohen, the cousins, even little Ethan, who sensed the shift and stopped banging his spoon. I felt exposed, like a child caught stealing cookies, and my heart pounded in my chest. "Sarah," I said, my voice softer than I wanted, "I didn't mean to upset you. I thought it was safe. A small one for toddlers. I just wanted Ethan to have fun, like Daniel did when he was little." Sarah's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Fun, Ruth? You don't get it. Kids get hurt on those things. And you didn't even ask us. You just decided, like you always do." She leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "I'm his mother. I decide what's safe for him, not you." I opened my mouth to respond, to explain that I'd checked the safety ratings, that I'd only wanted to see Ethan smile, but she wasn't done. Her voice rose, cutting through the air like a winter wind. "And honestly, Ruth, I'm done with this. If you can't respect our rules, I don't want you around Ethan anymore. Don't come back here." The words hit like a slap, stealing the breath from my lungs. The table was silent, the kind of silence that smothers you. Daniel stared at his plate, his fork frozen in his hand, saying nothing. Ethan, oblivious, reached for another piece of matzah, but the cousins whispered, their pity stinging more than Sarah's words. Mr. Cohen cleared his throat, looking away. Rachel touched my arm, but I barely felt it. I clutched my mother's napkin, my knuckles white, and forced a smile. The kind you wear to keep from crumbling. "I see," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort. "I'll go." I stood, my legs unsteady, and walked to the door, grabbing my coat from the rack. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes wide with something like guilt. But he didn't move. Sarah turned away, her jaw set, as if she'd won a battle. Ethan waved, his tiny voice calling. "Gamma," and it took everything in me not to run back and scoop him up. The drive back to Brooklyn was a blur, the highway stretching out like a wound I couldn't close. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Passover was supposed to be about freedom, about remembering how our people escaped oppression. But tonight, I felt more trapped than ever, caged by Sarah's words, by Daniel's silence, by the family I'd poured my life into. I thought of the seders of my childhood, when my mother would sing Dayenu and my father would tell stories of our ancestors. Back then, Passover was a promise of belonging, of love that endured. Tonight, that promise felt broken. I remembered 1978 when Daniel was 3, and we'd held a Seder in our tiny apartment. Just the 3 of us, me, Daniel, and my husband, Eli. The table was small, the food simple, but we'd laughed until our sides hurt, Daniel clapping as Eli hid the afikoman. "Ma, I'm gonna find it," he'd squealed. And when he did, I'd given him a shiny quarter, my heart full. That was the family I'd wanted to build, the one I'd dreamed of when I worked late nights, when I sold houses, when I sent money to Daniel and Sarah without asking for thanks. But now, I was a stranger in their world, my gefilte fish untouched, my stories cut short. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across my lap, and looked at the photo of Ethan on the fridge. His smile was a light I couldn't bear to lose. But Sarah's words had drawn a line I didn't know how to cross. "Don't come back here." They weren't just words, they were a wall, shutting me out of the only family I had left. I thought of the millions I'd given to Sarah's company, Levine Designs, through Gold Horizon Ventures. I'd signed those checks in quiet offices, believing I was building a future for them all. I thought of the loan for their house, the one I'd called a gift so Daniel wouldn't feel small. I'd done it all for love, for Ethan, for the hope of nights like this Seder was supposed to be. But love wasn't enough, not when it was met with dismissal, with disdain. I stood, my hands trembling, and walked to my desk. The laptop hummed as I opened it, the screen casting a cold glow. I pulled up the Gold Horizon account, the numbers stark against the dark millions of dollars, years of my life, poured into a company that Sarah thought was hers alone. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the phone. I could call my lawyer, end it all, pull the plug on Levine Designs and show them who I was. But I hesitated, Ethan's giggle echoing in my mind. I closed the laptop and sank into my chair, the weight of the night pressing down. Passover wasn't over yet. There was one more gathering, one more chance to face them. I didn't know what I'd do, but I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to disappear, not yet. The moonlight spilled through my Brooklyn apartment's window, painting silver streaks across the worn oak floor. It was well past midnight. The night of that disastrous Passover Seder still raw in my chest. I sat in my old armchair, the one Eli and I had bought when Daniel was born, its faded blue fabric soft under my fingers. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant hum of a neighbor's television and the occasional creak of the radiator. On the coffee table, my untouched cup of chamomile tea had gone cold, its steam long vanished, like the hope I'd carried to Daniel and Sarah's Seder. Sarah's words echoed in my mind, sharp as broken glass, "Don't come back here." They weren't just a dismissal, they were a wall, shutting me out of Ethan's life, out of the family I'd spent decades building. I looked at the photo on the fridge, Ethan's curls and bright smile, and felt a pang so deep it stole my breath. My bubbler, my light. And now I was forbidden to see him. I clutched my mother's embroidered napkin, the one I'd held during the Seder, its blue flowers a reminder of the strength she'd passed down to me. I wanted to cry, to let the tears I'd held back on the drive home finally fall. But something stopped me. A spark, small but stubborn, flickered in my heart. I wasn't ready to fade away, not like this. I stood, my knees stiff from sitting too long, and walked to the window. The Brooklyn street below was still, a few streetlights casting pools of gold on the pavement. I thought of my mother, her voice steady as she'd told me, years ago, "Ruth, you don't beg for respect, you demand it." She'd said it when I was young, unsure of myself. And now, at 68, I felt her words settle into me like roots. Sarah had crossed a line, and Daniel's silence had cut just as deep. I'd given them everything: my love, my money, my silence, and they'd treated me like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. No more. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I moved to my desk, the small oak one tucked in the corner of my living room, and opened my laptop. The screen's glow was harsh against the dark, but it felt like a beacon, pulling me forward. I logged into the Gold Horizon Ventures account, the one I'd used to funnel millions into Sarah's company, Levine Designs. The numbers stared back at me: years of investments, carefully calculated risks, all to give Sarah a chance to shine, to give Daniel a home, to build a future for Ethan. I'd never told them, not wanting to seem like I was pulling strings, but now I saw my silence for what it was: a mistake. They thought they'd built their world alone, and I'd let them believe it. My finger hovered over the phone. It was late, but my lawyer, David, was used to my odd hours. I dialed, my heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity, like the first note of a song I'd forgotten how to sing. Ruth David's voice was groggy but alert. Everything okay? No, I said, my voice steady. I need you to pull every cent from Levine Designs. All of it. Start the process now. There was a pause, the rustle of him sitting up in bed. Ruth, that's millions. It'll tank the company. Are you sure? I closed my eyes, picturing Ethan's smile, Daniel's averted gaze, Sarah's cold dismissal. I'm sure, I said. They need to know who I am. David sighed, but I could hear the click of his laptop opening. All right, I'll get the paperwork started, but... Ruth, this is big. You're pulling the rug out from under them. Good, I said, and hung up. I leaned back, the spark in my chest now a quiet fire. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something deeper, a resolve I hadn't felt since the days I'd sold my first brownstone. When I'd known I could build something from nothing. Sarah thought she could erase me from Ethan's life, but she didn't know the half of what I'd done for her. Neither did Daniel. It was time they learned. The next morning, I woke early, the sunlight soft through my lace curtains. My apartment smelled of coffee and the faint cinnamon of yesterday's rugelach, a comforting anchor as I planned my next steps. I didn't want to destroy Sarah's company out of spite. That wasn't me. But I needed them to see me. Really see me. Not as a meddling grandmother, but as the woman who'd held their dreams together. The trampoline had been a misstep. I admitted that. But it was also a symbol of something bigger, my right to be part of Ethan's life, to have a voice in this family. I picked up the phone again, this time calling Miriam Katz, my oldest friend and a retired pediatric nurse who'd seen me through every storm. Her voice was warm, like a hug through the line. Ruth, you sound different. What's going on? I told her everything, the trampoline, the Seder, Sarah's ultimatum. My voice cracked when I said, she told me not to come back. Miriam, not to see Ethan, I can't lose him. Oh. Ruth, she said, her tone soft but fierce. That's not right. You're his grandmother. You've done more for them than they'll ever know. That's just it, I said, pacing my small living room. They don't know, but they're about to. I asked Miriam to help me gather data on trampolines, anything to show I hadn't been reckless. She promised to dig into her old medical journals and contact a colleague at the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'll get you something solid, she said. You're not the villain here. Ruth, I thanked her, feeling a weight lift. Miriam's support was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that I had allies who saw my worth. I hung up and turned to the trampoline itself, the source of this mess. I called the store, arranging to return it, but I didn't stop there. I ordered a new gift for Ethan, a set of wooden building blocks, safe and educational, with a soft net bag to hold them. I wrote a note to go with it from Grandma. Because you deserve joy that's safe and true. It was a small gesture, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a way to show I could still give without bending to Sarah's rules. Later that day, I sat at my desk again, a notepad in front of me. I started a letter to Daniel, my handwriting steady despite the emotions swirling inside. I wrote about the Seder, about how Sarah's words had broken something in me, about how his silence had hurt even more. I wrote about the money, the millions for Levine Designs, the loan for their house things I'd never meant to reveal, but now felt necessary. I did it all for you. For Ethan, I wrote, but I can't keep giving if I'm not wanted. I didn't know if I'd send it, not yet. But putting the words on paper was like setting down a burden I'd carried too long. I thought of 1985 when I'd signed my first real estate deal. Daniel at my side. His comic book clutched tight. I'd felt unstoppable then, like I could build a world for us. Now, at 68, I felt that same strength stirring. But it was different, quieter, deeper, rooted in the knowledge that I deserved respect, not just love. Sarah thought she could control everything: Ethan's diet, his toys, his grandmother, but she didn't know the woman she was pushing away. I'd built her world, and I could unbuild it if I had to. The days leading up to the final Passover gathering passed in a blur. I kept busy, meeting with David to finalize the withdrawal of funds from Levine Designs. He showed me the paperwork, the numbers stark and final. "It's done," he said, his voice cautious. "The money's out. Sarah's company will feel it soon, probably within days." I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. "Thank you, David. I don't want to hurt them, but I need them to understand." He looked at me, his eyes kind. "You're a force, Ruth, always have been." I smiled, the first real smile in days. I'm just a grandmother who loves her family. At home, I prepared for the gathering, choosing my favorite sweater, the blue one that made me feel like myself. I packed the wooden blocks for Ethan, the note tucked inside, and rehearsed what I'd say. I wouldn't shout or beg. I'd speak with the calm of a woman who knew her worth, who'd survived loss and built to life from ashes. I thought of my mother again, her voice echoing, "You demand respect." I was ready. The morning of the gathering, I stood in my kitchen, stirring a pot of chicken soup I'd made for no reason other than habit. The smell filled the apartment, warm and grounding, like a memory of better days. I looked at the photo of Ethan, then at the one of Daniel and me, taken in 1978 at a Passover Seder. His small hand in mine, his laughter as we sang Dayenu. That was the love I'd fought for, the love I was still fighting for. Sarah could take away my place at her table, but she couldn't take away who I was. I closed my eyes, picturing the gathering ahead. Sarah would be there, her defenses up, her words sharp. Daniel would be quiet, caught between us. Ethan would be the light, his giggle a reminder of why I couldn't give up. And I'd walk in, not as the grandmother they'd dismissed, but as Ruth Goldstein, the woman who'd built their world and could reshape it if she chose. The fire in me burned steady now, not wild but focused, like the candles on a Seder table. Passover was almost over, but my story wasn't. I'd face them one last time, and this time they'd see me. The final Passover gathering was held on a soft April evening, the Long Island sky streaked with pink and gold as I pulled into Daniel and Sarah's driveway. My hands gripped the steering wheel, not from nerves, but from a quiet strength that had been growing inside me since that humiliating Seder. The wooden building blocks for Ethan sat in a gift bag on the passenger seat, my handwritten note tucked inside, from Grandma. "Because you deserve joy that's safe and true." I'd returned the trampoline days ago, its absence a silent statement, but I wasn't here to gloat. I was here to be seen, to reclaim the place I'd earned in this family. I stepped out, smoothing my favorite blue sweater, the one that felt like a piece of home. The air carried the faint scent of lilacs, a reminder that spring was still unfolding, and so was I. Daniel and Sarah's house glowed warmly, its windows framing a scene of family candles, laughter, the clink of glasses. But I knew what lay beneath the tension, the unspoken wounds, the truth I'd kept hidden for too long. I carried the gift bag and a manila envelope containing my letter to Daniel, my heart steady as I walked to the door. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, the kind my mother had taught me to demand. Inside. The dining room was a softer echo of the Seder, less formal but still festive. A smaller group had gathered Cousin Rachel, neighbor Mr. Cohen, my friend Miriam Katz, and a few others. The table held leftover matzah, a bowl of charasé, and a pitcher of iced tea, the candles replaced by a single menorah glowing in the center. Ethan sat in his high chair, playing with a toy truck, his giggles alight in the room. Sarah stood by the kitchen counter, arranging a tray of rouge à lèvres, her movements brisk. Daniel greeted me with a hug, but his eyes were cautious, like he sensed something coming. "Ma, Glad you're here, he said, his voice warm but strained. You brought something for Ethan. I nodded, setting the gift bag on the table. Just a little something, I said, my smile gentle. I hope it's okay. Sarah glanced over, her expression guarded. Ruth, you didn't have to, she said, her tone polite but cool. We're trying to keep Ethan's toys minimal. I felt the familiar sting, but I didn't flinch. It's safe, I said, meeting her eyes. I made sure of it. The room buzzed with small talk. Rachel chatting about her new apartment, Mr. Cohen complaining about the Mets. I sat near Ethan, ruffling his curls, and whispered, Bubbly, you're gonna love your new blocks. He grinned, and for a moment, I could almost forget the Seder, Sarah's ultimatum, the wall she'd built between us. Almost. The tension broke halfway through the evening, as we nibbled on rugelach and sipped tea. Sarah set down her glass, her eyes flicking to the backyard, where the trampoline box was no longer visible. She turned to me, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter. Ruth, I noticed you returned the trampoline, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. That's good, but it doesn't change the fact that you went behind our backs. You never listen. You think you know better than us. The room went quiet, the way it had at the Seder, every eye turning to me. Daniel shifted in his seat, his gaze fixed on the table. Ethan banged his truck, oblivious, but the adults leaned in, sensing a storm. I felt the old urge to smile, to smooth things over, but the fire I'd kindled in my apartment burned steady now. I stood, my hands resting lightly on the table, and looked at Sarah, not with anger but with clarity. Sarah, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're right. I made a mistake with the trampoline. But you're wrong about one thing. I've listened to you every time you've corrected me, every time you've pushed me away. And I've kept quiet, because I love Ethan, and I love this family, but I'm done being invisible. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a flicker of defiance. Invisible Ruth. You're not invisible. You don't get how we're raising Ethan. You keep doing things your way. I took a breath, the kind you take before you change everything. You think you know everything. Sarah, you think you built Levine Designs all on your own, that this house, this life, is all you're doing, but do you know who's been holding it up? She frowned, confused. What are you talking about? I glanced at Miriam, who nodded slightly, her presence a quiet anchor. Gold Horizon Ventures, I said, my voice steady as the menorah's flame. I'm the one behind it. I've poured millions into your company. Sarah, millions to keep your dreams alive, to keep this house standing. I've been the silent partner, the one who believed in you when you were still sketching on napkins. The room froze. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. Rachel gasped, and Mr. Cohen leaned forward, his eyebrows raised. Ethan, bless him, clapped his hands, thinking it was a game. Your Gold Horizon, Sarah stammered, her face pale. That's not possible. I would have known. You didn't know, I said, my words slow and deliberate, because I didn't want you to. I didn't want to be the mother-in-law who waved money around. I wanted you to feel you'd earned it. But I've given more than money, Sarah. I've given my heart, my silence, my patience, and what did I get? You told me not to come back, not to see Ethan. You drew a line, and I'm done crossing it. Sarah's hands trembled, her voice rising. Ruth, you can't just my company. It's everything. We're about to sign a huge contract. If you pull the money, I already did, I said, and the words landed like a stone in still water. This morning, I withdrew every cent. If you don't want me in this family, I don't need to keep your company standing. The silence was deafening. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of panic. She turned to Daniel, her voice breaking. Daniel, say something. She can't do this. Daniel looked at me, his face a mix of shock and guilt. Ma, is this true? You've been funding Sarah's company and the house. I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. I did it for you, for Ethan, for the life I wanted you to have, but I can't keep giving if I'm not wanted. I reached into the manila envelope and pulled out the letter I'd written, placing it on the table in front of Daniel. This is for you, I said. It says everything, how much I've loved you, how much it hurt to be pushed away. Read it when you're ready. Sarah's voice was a whisper now, desperate. Ruth, please, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Don't do this to us. I looked at her, seeing not just the woman who'd hurt me, but the mother who loved Ethan, the dreamer who'd built something from nothing. I'm not doing this to you, Sarah. I said, I'm doing it for me. I deserve to be seen. I turned to Ethan, kissing his forehead, his curls soft against my lips. I love you, Bubbly. I whispered, then picked up my coat and walked to the door. The room was still, the cousins and neighbors staring, their murmurs like a distant tide. Miriam followed me, her hand on my shoulder, a silent promise of support. I stepped outside, the spring air cool against my face, and felt a weight lift. For the first time in years, I was Ruth Goldstein, not just a grandmother, not just a shadow. As I drove back to Brooklyn, the highway stretched out like a path to something new. The stars above were bright, like the candles I'd lit for seders long ago. And I thought of 1978, when Daniel and I had sung Dayenu in our tiny apartment, Eli's laughter filling the room. That was the love I'd carried, the love I'd poured into this family, even when they couldn't see it. Sarah's panic, Daniel's shock they weren't my victory, but they were my truth, laid bare at last. I thought of the letter, the words I'd written in the quiet of my apartment. I'd told Daniel about the Seder, about Sarah's ultimatum, about the millions I'd given without asking for thanks. I'd written about Ethan, how his smile was my light, and how losing him felt like losing the sun. But I'd also written about me, about the woman who'd built a fortune from nothing, who'd survived loss and kept going, who deserved respect as much as love. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across my lap, and looked at the photo of Ethan on the fridge. I didn't know what would happen next, if Sarah would fight, if Daniel would call, if I'd ever hold Ethan again. But I knew one thing: I'd stood up, not with anger, but with dignity, and that was enough for now. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Miriam. You were incredible. Ruth, she wrote, they're reeling, but they'll come around. You did what you had to. I smiled, stirring a pot of chicken soup in my kitchen, the smell grounding me. Levine Designs would feel the loss of my money soon. Sarah's big contract was likely crumbling as we spoke. But I didn't feel triumph, only a quiet peace. I'd spent years building their world, and now I was building something new, a life where I mattered, where my voice was heard. I looked at the calendar, the final day of Passover marked in red. The holiday was ending, but my story wasn't. I'd faced them, shown them the truth, and walked away with my head high. Whatever came next, I was ready. The Brooklyn morning was soft and golden, sunlight slipping through my lace curtains like a promise of something new. It was a month after that final Passover gathering, where I'd stood in Daniel and Sarah's dining room and laid bare the truth. I was the silent force behind Levine Designs, the one who'd poured millions into their dreams, and I'd pulled it all away. The air in my apartment smelled of coffee and the faint cinnamon of rugelach I'd baked for no reason other than habit, a comfort in the quiet days that followed. I stood at my kitchen counter, stirring a pot of chicken soup, the steam rising like memories of Seder's past. My heart was lighter now, not because I'd won, but because I'd found my voice. The fallout from that night had been swift, Levine Designs, Sarah's pride and joy, was teetering on the edge of collapse without my funding. I'd heard through Miriam that Sarah's big contract had fallen through, the client backing out when word spread of financial trouble. Daniel had called me once, his voice heavy with guilt, but I'd kept our conversation short. "Read the letter. Daniel," I'd said. "Then we'll talk." I wasn't angry, but I wasn't ready to sweep everything under the rug, not after Sarah's ultimatum, not after being told I couldn't see Ethan. Yet, as I chopped carrots for the soup, I felt a quiet peace. I'd stood up, not with shouts, but with the calm of a woman who knew her worth. I'd shown them who I was, Ruth Goldstein, not just a grandmother, but a force, a builder, a survivor. And now I was building something new, a life where I mattered, where my love for Ethan didn't come at the cost of my dignity. The knock at my door came just after noon, a hesitant tap that broke the rhythm of my stirring. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, the one with my mother's embroidered blue flowers, and opened the door to find Sarah standing there, her face pale and tired. She wore a simple sweater, no makeup, her usual polish replaced by something raw. Behind her, Daniel held Ethan, who wriggled in his arms, his curls bouncing as he spotted me. Gamma Ethan squealed, reaching out, and my heart leapt. "Ruth," Sarah said, her voice soft, almost fragile. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside, gesturing to the living room. "Of course," I said, my tone steady but warm. "Sit down. I'll get some tea." Ethan toddled to me as soon as Daniel set him down, and I scooped him up, kissing his forehead. "Bubble, you're getting so big," I whispered, breathing in his familiar scent. For a moment, nothing else mattered, not the Seder, not the money, not the hurt. But as I settled Ethan with a toy truck from my basket of grandchild treasures, I turned to Sarah and Daniel, ready to hear what they'd come to say. Sarah sat on my faded blue couch, her hands clasped tightly. Daniel stood by the window, his shoulders hunched, avoiding my gaze. The room was quiet, save for Ethan's happy babbling and the faint tick of my old clock. I poured chamomile tea into mismatched mugs, the steam curling like a bridge between us, and handed them each one. "Ruth," Sarah began, her voice trembling. I owe you an apology, a big one. I didn't know about the money, about Gold Horizon, about everything you've done for us. I was wrong, so wrong, to say those things at the Seder, to tell you not to come back." I sipped my tea, letting her words settle. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and I saw the weight she carried not just as a mother, but as a woman who'd built something and watched it crumble. "Go on," I said, my voice gentle but firm. She took a shaky breath. "When you pulled the funding, everything fell apart, the contract, the clients. Levine Designs is barely hanging on. But it's not just the company, it's me. I was so caught up in being in control, in proving I could do it all, that I pushed you away. I thought you were, I don't know, meddling. But I see now how much you've given us. And I'm sorry. Ruth, I'm so sorry." Daniel finally spoke, his voice low. "Ma, I read your letter. I didn't know how much you'd done the house. Sarah's company, all of it. I should have spoken up at the Seder. I should have stood up for you. I let you down. I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd raised alone, and saw the guilt in his eyes. It hurt, but it also softened something in me. You did let me down. Daniel," I said, my tone honest but kind. "But I know you were caught in the middle. I just needed you to see me, really see me." Sarah's voice broke as she spoke again. "I see you now, Ruth, and I don't want to lose you, not for me, but for Ethan. He loves you. You're his grandmother, and I was wrong to try to take that away." I set my mug down, my hand steady despite the emotions swirling inside. "Sarah, Daniel, I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I gave you everything, my money, my heart, my silence, because I love you, because I love Ethan. But I can't keep giving if I'm not respected. I deserve to be part of this family, not just a guest. Sarah nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're right, and I want to make it right. I want you to be part of Ethan's life. I signed us up for a Mommy and Me class, and I was hoping you'd come with us. You and Ethan, together. I looked at Ethan, playing happily with his truck, and felt a warmth spread through me, like sunlight after a long winter. I'd like that, I said, my voice soft, but there's something else. Levine Designs. I'll reinvest, but not all of it. And I want you to acknowledge what I've done. Sarah, not for my ego, but because it's the truth. She hesitated, then nodded. I will. There's an event next month, a company fundraiser. I'll tell everyone what you've done for us. I promise. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes meeting mine. Ma, I'm with you. Whatever you need. I'm here. I smiled. The first real smile I'd felt in weeks. That's all I've ever wanted. Daniel, to be here, with you, with Ethan. The weeks that followed were a slow mending, like stitching a torn quilt back together. I went to the Mommy and Me class with Sarah and Ethan, held at a community center in Long Island. The room was bright, filled with laughter and the patter of tiny feet. Ethan clung to me as we sang songs and played with scarves. His giggles a balm to my heart. Sarah watched us, her smile tentative but genuine, and I saw something new in her, a willingness to share, to let me in. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Daniel came to Brooklyn one afternoon, just the two of us, and we talked over coffee at my kitchen table. He apologized again, his voice thick with emotion, and promised to stand up for me, to make sure I was never sidelined again. I didn't realize how much I'd taken you for granted. Ma, he said, and I hugged him, feeling the boy I'd raised in the man he'd become. But the real healing came outside their house, in a place I hadn't expected. Miriam had invited me to a local Jewish community center, where they ran a program teaching kids about Passover and other traditions. I started volunteering, showing up with trays of rugelach and stories of the Exodus. The children, with their wide eyes and endless questions, reminded me of Ethan, of Daniel, of the girl I'd been. One day, as I taught them to sing Dayenu, a little girl hugged me and said, "You're the best grandma ever." I laughed, my heart full, and realized I didn't need to be just Ethan's grandmother. I could be a light for others, too. The company fundraiser came in early June, a warm evening at a Manhattan hotel ballroom. Sarah had invited me, insisting I sit at the head table. The room was elegant, with chandeliers and white linen, but it was Sarah's speech that stayed with me. She stood at the podium, her voice steady, and told the crowd about me, Ruth Goldstein, the woman who'd believed in her, who'd funded Levine Designs when it was just a dream. She thanked me, her eyes meeting mine across the room, and the applause that followed felt like a warm embrace. I didn't need the recognition, but it meant something to hear it, to know I was seen. Levine Designs was recovering, slowly, with a smaller reinvestment from me and new clients Sarah had fought to win. She was learning, just as I was. That strength didn't mean control, it meant trust, connection, letting others in. Daniel, too, was changing, calling me more often, inviting me to dinner, making sure Ethan and I had our time together. One Sunday, I took Ethan to a park in Long Island, the same one where I'd pushed Daniel on swings decades ago. The air was warm, the grass dotted with dandelions, and Ethan ran ahead, clutching the wooden blocks I'd given him. I sat on a bench, watching him build a wobbly tower, his laughter like music. Sarah and Daniel joined us, standing a little ways off, their hands clasped, their smile soft. They didn't need to say anything. We were family, imperfect but trying, and that was enough. I thought of 1978, that Passover Seder with Daniel and Eli, when love had felt simple, like a song we all knew by heart. Life wasn't simple anymore, but it was rich, layered with pain and joy, loss and renewal. I'd stood up, not just for myself, but for every woman who'd ever felt forgotten, who'd given everything and been asked for more. And I'd found something new, a community, a purpose, a peace that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. As Ethan ran to me, his arms wide, I caught him and held him close, his warmth a reminder of why I'd fought. "I love you. Bubbly," I whispered, and he giggled, his curls tickling my cheek. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of spring, and I knew, deep in my bones, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. No matter your age, you deserve love and respect. If Ruth's story resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel to discover more stories of courage and healing, and join us in celebrating the strength we all carry within us.